Imagine a hero. Not the kind on the propaganda posters. All polished chrome and booming anthem music. Our hero smells like burnt oil, disappointment, and 15 years of forgotten promises. Meet Elliot Marlowe, an engineer who lives in the station's dark, forgotten corners. He wears a suit, the Mark II, a walking relic of scrapped parts and unauthorized repairs. A suit so ugly he wrote a permanent marker graffiti tag on the chest, Percussive Maintenance Zone. Tonight, on the grandest stage in the galaxy, the elite were laughing. They were mocking Earth's technology, our champion, and most of all, they were mocking Elliot's rusty armor. But what they didn't know, that rusted-out suit wasn't a symbol of failure. It was the only thing on the entire station that had survived a disaster that should have cracked the Elysian Reach in half. And the woman laughing the hardest, the magnificent, terrifying sovereign Selene Varkis, queen of the fierce Kharvhul Clans? She didn't know that the very engineer she was humiliating was the ghost from her deepest, most terrifying memory. This is the story of how a garbage collector saved the galaxy, how the Wolf Queen knelt, and how a moment of sheer embarrassment unveiled a forgotten legend. You are about to witness what happens when the past comes back, wearing a suit held together by duct tape and sheer, stubborn human spirit. But before we plunge into the high-stakes world of the Elysian Reach, into the drama, the impossible challenge, and the moment that will change two lives forever, do me a huge favor. Give this video a like right now to help the YouTube algorithm know that this kind of epic storytelling deserves a bigger audience. Share it with a friend, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a single chapter. And tell me, where in the world are you watching this story right now? Let me know in the comments. Your suggestions and support hype up this channel, so let's get into it. The fate of Earth's reputation is on the line, and the only man who can save it is currently wrestling with a broken foam sprayer. The colossal structure they called the Elysian Reach didn't just orbit the dead world below, it claimed it. It hung in the void like a priceless, slow-spinning torus of steel and glass, a defiant monument designed to look like a jewel in the vacuum, daring to stand where a catastrophic history had almost swallowed it whole. Tonight, the station was practically bursting under the weight of the annual Unity Festival lights. Holographic banners the size of starships draped over the docking pylons, proclaiming peace in a dozen languages. The air scrubbers on the high decks were working overtime, pumping out synthetic scents, expensive ozone, the aroma of gourmet roasted meats, and something far less pleasant, the thin, cold smell of high-stakes political desperation. But if you were Elliot Marlowe and you lived deep in the forgotten maintenance tunnels, you knew the Elysian Reach smelled like something else entirely. Underneath the fancy perfumes, the station perpetually reeked of burnt insulation and 15 years of sheer, paralyzing fear. Elliot knelt in a cramped service access shaft in Sector 4, his magnetic boots thrumming softly, keeping him anchored to the metal grating. A specialized hydro spanner was clamped in his thick, battered glove. He wasn't focused on the shimmering spectacle hundreds of meters above him. His eyes were fixed on a 3-meter patch of hull wall to his left. To the untrained eye, which included every dignitary, royal, and tourist currently sipping champagne and discussing interstellar treaties, the wall was pristine, painted a soothing, sterile cream white. Elliot knew better. He knew if he scraped away that paint, he would find carbon-scorched titanium. Go deeper, and you'd hit structural reinforcements panic-welded into place a decade and a half ago. This was the scar, the invisible, agonizing reminder of the test fire, the engineering calamity that had almost cracked the entire ring in half before the grand opening. And this scar was not just history, it was the entire foundation of Elliot's lonely, gritty existence. "You are staring at the wall again, Elliot," a synthesized voice chirped smoothly in his ear. "Heart rate is elevating. Do you require a sedative?" "Zip it, Billie Holiday," Elliot muttered, his voice muffled by the rusty helmet of his Mark II power suit. He tightened a stubborn bolt on a primary life support conduit. Billie Holiday was the station's main AI, a soothing, jazz-inspired persona designed to reassure the passengers. To Elliot, she was an over-caffeinated hall monitor who constantly logged his minor infractions and worried about his mental health, which was currently excellent, considering the critical piece of engineering he was saving. "I am merely upholding protocol. Furthermore, your current position violates the clearance parameters for the upcoming VIP transfer sequence," Billie noted, sounding only mildly judgmental. "Yeah, well, protocol isn't going to fix this, is it?" Elliot grunted, applying more leverage. The problem he was wrestling with wasn't flashy. It wasn't a meteor strike or a sudden depressurization. It was far more insidious, the kind of breakdown that kills a project slowly from the inside out. He was tightening a bearing cap on a primary life support conduit that feeds Sector 4. The station's supposedly perfect automated maintenance had completely missed it. The bearing was barely weeping, a slow, invisible leak of synthetic atmospheric gas. It wasn't a leak that would kill anyone tomorrow or next week. But left unattended, it would subtly degrade the atmosphere of an entire sector over the next 6 months, leading to a slow, irreversible decline in cognitive function, morale, and ultimately the station's structural integrity. This was the core flaw in the Elysian Reach design. The engineers had planned for every possible large-scale disaster, but had completely failed to account for the human element, the small, persistent, inevitable failures that only a dedicated, hands-on mechanic with a suspicious mind and a knack for listening to the metal could catch. That mechanic, that human element, was Elliot Marlowe, sweating inside a suit that was officially classified as unfit for scrap. The suit, his battered Mark II, was an ancient, heavy relic, 15 years old and made of a discontinued ferro-titanium alloy that naturally oxidized to a deep, ugly shade of rust red. He'd welded countless replacement plates onto it, sometimes using pieces salvaged from other people's garbage. The external foam sprayer mounted on his left shoulder hadn't worked in 3 years, which was probably a blessing, and the external comm speaker often shorted, making him sound like an angry astronaut trapped in a fishbowl. He wore it because, unlike the flimsy new models designed for aesthetics, the Mark II was rugged. It was his shield against the station's endless, perfect lies. It was a tangible piece of history, a memento of his former life that he couldn't or wouldn't let go of. "Elliot, I must insist," Billy's voice intensified, taking on the tone of a very concerned flight attendant. VIP transfer sequence engaged. The delegation from the Scythian Dominion and the Kharvhul Clans will exit the promenade doors in T-60 seconds. Any personnel visible in the service corridors will be tagged as non-compliant and fined a significant portion of their paycheck. A low whirring sound echoed down the shaft. A small, spherical maintenance drone, all polished silver and blue light, zipped past the grating and stopped right over Elliot. "Unit 77 is here to initiate area sanitation," Billy announced brightly, her tone shifting to an irritating customer service cheer. "Please vacate the restricted zone. We need to ensure the viewing corridor is immaculate for the Queen." Wait. Billy, hold sanitation." Elliot's heart hammered against his ribs. He needed one more turn on the bolt. It was almost tight, almost secure. But the spanner was jammed now, fused to the bolt by the sheer force he'd exerted. He could feel the conduit vibrating under the strain of his repair. "I'm secured. I can't leave this. The integrity of the conduit is compromised if I release now." The AI, programmed for unwavering adherence to the schedule and oblivious to real-world mechanical stress, cut him off with a click. "Time has elapsed. Initiating sanitation sequence Alpha 10. The drone, a perfect, efficient idiot with zero situational awareness, let loose a wide, powerful blast of thick, pressurized, white cleaning foam. It completely missed the specific area Elliot had just cleaned, but it nailed the Mark II suit directly in the chest, coating the rusty metal in a ridiculous, meringue-like layer of froth. It looked like a walking rusty wedding cake that had been in a fight with a pigeon. "You piece of..." Elliot yelled into his suit mic, the frustration of the near-impossible repair, the fine and the sheer indignity boiling over. His external speaker, true to form, chose that precise moment to short-circuit, transforming his very human curse, not into a whisper but into a loud, crackling expletive that echoed with perfect amplification in the narrow service tunnel. "Z, you idiot. Z." In the same instant, the reinforced double doors to the Grand Promenade, 100 feet away, hissed open, revealing the brilliant, oppressive light of the diplomatic reception. Elliot, covered in foam, jammed in the grating, cursing loudly, was now the main attraction of the entire political galaxy. The first person to emerge was Ambassador Eleanor Vance, Earth's representative. She was a woman who always looked perfectly tailored, professional, and perpetually stressed. The sight of Elliot, a rusty, foaming embarrassment, made her eyes widen in horror. Her diplomatic smile, designed to charm interstellar warlords, crumpled into a look of sheer, panicked mortification. This was exactly the kind of unprofessionalism the Scythian Dominion would seize upon. Then came the delegation from the Scythian Dominion. They were a tall, elegant, and notoriously arrogant race, draped in flowing silk robes that seemed to shimmer with contempt. Leading them was Lord Xander, a figure of glacial poise and immaculate grooming. Lord Xander took in the sight of the battered Mark II suit, the official Earth Tech model, covered in foam and grime and broadcasting mechanical complaints. A slow, chilling sneer spread across his refined, pale face. He paused his entire diplomatic entourage just to look at Elliot, drawing out the moment of humiliation like a predator savoring a kill. He spoke, his voice modulated perfectly to carry just enough amusement and malice into the waiting media pickups. Is this the best of the human defense technology, Ambassador Vance? It appears your warrior has failed to master the simple art of bathing. Perhaps the foam will prevent the rust from flaking onto the precious Elysian Reach carpets. The gathered crowd of lesser diplomats and intergalactic media laughed. A high, cruel sound that bounced off the steel walls and resonated with all the years of Earth's struggling reputation in the cosmos. It was the sound of a small, weak planet being dismissed. Elliot, trapped and burning with humiliation, squeezed his eyes shut behind the visor. I just secured your life support conduit, he thought bitterly, and you're laughing at my armor. I save the station every day and this is my reward. Finally, the last figure emerged and the laughter immediately died. It was Sovereign Selene Varkis, the formidable queen of the Kharvhul Clans. She was magnificent and terrifying, a figure of dark grace, her movements fluid and powerful, her silver-white eyes sharp and predatory. The Kharvhul were a wolf-like, fiercely isolationist race, known for their unwavering focus and military prowess, and their queen's presence here was the diplomatic coup of the decade. She wore a collar of what looked like solidified shadow, and her heavy ceremonial armor glittered with a dark, unsettling light. The Kharvhul presence commanded silence. Selene Varkis looked past Lord Xander's sneering face and fixed her gaze directly on Elliot Marlowe. She didn't look at the foam or the rust. She didn't see the ridiculous mechanic. She looked at the suit itself, at the Mark II's unique, brutalist silhouette, and particularly at the deeply familiar weld scars around the left shoulder joint. And then a sound escaped her. A low, haunting, almost mocking laugh, colder than the vacuum outside the hull, but with a strange undercurrent of something Elliot couldn't identify, maybe recognition, maybe pure, distilled rage. Elliot felt his blood turn to ice. He didn't know why, but that laugh and the intensity of her silver stare felt like a judgment that went deeper than just his suit. It felt personal. It felt like history he didn't even know he had. With a final desperate heave, the jammed spanner finally turned, making a loud metallic thunk. The sound of the bearing cap sealing, the sound of the Elysian Reach's future being secured, but also the sound of his humiliation being cemented. But all the onlookers heard was the desperate scramble of a clumsy, ridiculous repairman. Elliot was now a spectacle, a stain on the red carpet of interstellar diplomacy. He had to retreat, to vanish back into the shadows, but he was pinned, humiliated, and locked in the chilling gaze of the Wolf Queen. The only way out was to somehow crawl away, carrying the full, miserable weight of Earth's reputation on his rusty, foam-covered shoulders. Then, Lord Xander took the opportunity, pointing a long, elegant finger at Elliot. Ambassador Vance, the Kharvhul are here for one reason, to select a defensive partner. We are here to compete for that honor. If that is the quality of the technology you present to the Queen, I suggest you forfeit now. Perhaps your maintenance technicians can focus on mopping floors instead of participating in matters of galactic security. He bowed to Selene with exaggerated courtesy. Sovereign, the Scythian Dominion is ready to present the Titan-class drones. Flawless, silent, invisible. The crisis, Elliot realized, was even worse than he thought. The Unity Festival wasn't about peace, it was about a bidding war for the Kharvhul's military allegiance. And Earth's only representative was a disgraced, foam-covered man in a rusty suit. Ambassador Vance, reeling, tried to salvage the situation. Sovereign Selene, please forgive this maintenance interruption. This is merely a retired model. We assure you our defense systems are cutting edge. Selene Varkis raised a single, elegantly clawed hand, silencing the ambassador instantly. Her silver eyes never left Elliot. She spoke, and her voice was a low, resonant growl, surprisingly deep, like granite shifting deep underground. We do not require cutting edge, the Queen stated, her voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. The Kharvhul require proof. We require technology that has survived the impossible. Lord Xander, your Titan drones are untested against true entropy. They are toys. She took 2 steps toward Elliot's caged, humiliating position, the powerful musculature of her legs visible beneath her armor. The air grew thick with tension. We offer a contest, she declared, her eyes still locked on Elliot, though she spoke to the room. An impromptu test. A challenge of survival. If either delegation can field one piece of technology, a suit, a drone, a simple tool, that can withstand a single burst of the new Kharvhul Entropy Field generator, then that race will earn the right to formal negotiations. Lord Xander's eyes narrowed. The entropy field was infamous. It aged metal centuries in seconds, turning steel to dust. It was a terrifying proposal, specifically designed to be impossible to pass. Selene Varkis then smiled, and it was not a kind expression. She pointed a sharp, metallic finger directly at the foam-covered Mark II suit. "We will begin with the human entry," she announced, the growl in her voice now unmistakable. "Bring that object forward. Let us see if its rust is merely superficial or if it runs straight to the core." Elliot Marlowe, the station's forgotten janitor, was suddenly and irrevocably dragged from the shadows of his service tunnel and thrust into the center of a galactic power struggle, all because of a busted AI, a jammed spanner, and a very, very old suit. His humiliation was complete. His life was about to change forever. Elliot didn't need the external comms to know the entire Grand Promenade was holding its breath. His rusty, foam-covered suit, the Mark II, was now the diplomatic centerpiece, standing in stark, ridiculous contrast to the polished chrome of the Scythian Dominion's delegation. The silence was deafening, broken only by the low, predatory thrum of the Kharvhul Queen's ceremonial armor. Ambassador Eleanor Vance rushed forward, her face pale with desperation. "Sovereign Selene, with all due respect, this man is not part of the presentation." He is wearing a suit of human design, is he not?" Selene Varkis interrupted, her voice a sharp, cutting sound that sliced through the ambassador's panicked protest. She gestured toward Lord Xander. "And the Scythian Dominion offered a challenge to test human technology. The rules are now simple: survival. Bring it forward." Two massive Kharvhul guards, taller than Elliot's suit and wrapped in dark, heavy cloaks, moved with terrifying speed. They were all muscle and fluid motion. Before Elliot could even process the order, they had lifted his suit, grating and all, right out of the service shaft, carrying the humiliated engineer like a piece of refuse. They placed him down hard in the center of the promenade, directly on the shining, perfect marble floor. "Elliot Marlowe," Billie Holiday's voice whispered in his helmet, sounding genuinely anxious now. "Protocol violation Gamma 9. You are now classified as a hazard object. I am analyzing the Queen's proposal. The entropy field generator, as rumored, uses highly localized temporal degradation fields to simulate extreme age. The Mark II's structural integrity is rated at 0 against this technology. Suggest immediate self-ejection and surrender of the equipment." "No," Elliot grated, clutching the spanner handle still jammed in his glove. "I'm not abandoning the Mark II. Not now." He felt the eyes of the universe on him, the media drones whirring, the Scythians sneering, and most importantly, the cold, calculating gaze of the Kharvhul Queen. He knew what they saw, an embarrassment, but he saw something else. He saw the weld seams he'd personally repaired, the patched plating he'd scrounged for. This suit wasn't a piece of technology, it was a testament to survival. Lord Xander, seizing the moment, stepped forward with a confident, almost theatrical flourish. "Sovereign Selene, while the humanities' maintenance shell is being inspected, allow us to present a more suitable candidate." He snapped his fingers. A sleek, black drone unit, the Titan class, silently floated onto the floor. It was all flawless curves and dark, stealth polymer. The Titan is built from a diamond lattice composite. It is the pinnacle of silent, efficient, and nearly indestructible design, Xander boasted, his voice dripping with condescension. Selene Varkis looked at the drone with a lack of interest that was far more insulting than outright contempt. "Let us see the field." The Kharvhul guards rolled out a small, metallic sphere, the entropy field generator. It was unassuming, just a dark sphere crackling with a faint, purple-red static. A guard aimed the generator at the Titan drone. See. The field hit the drone. For a moment nothing happened. Then the flawless black polymer skin began to bubble, turning gray, then white, then crumbling to fine dust. The drone collapsed, its internal mechanisms seizing as the metal aged decades in milliseconds. With a quiet tink, the Titan drone was reduced to a small pile of brittle, useless debris. The test had lasted less than 2 seconds. Lord Xander was stunned. His jaw dropped and his face flushed a mottled red. He stammered, "Impossible. It is rated for toys," Selene Varkis finished coolly. "Your science simulates strength, but it cannot withstand true time. Now the human entry." The two guards, treating Elliot's rusty suit like a piece of trash they had to move, positioned him directly in front of the humming entropy generator. The sheer dread that seized Elliot was palpable. This wasn't just a physical threat, it was a challenge to the very essence of the Mark II, which he had so painstakingly kept alive. "Elliot, the power readings of the generator are far exceeding safe exposure limits," Billie Holiday warned urgently. Eject. Now. Elliot gripped the jammed spanner tight, the metal digging painfully into his palm. He looked at the Queen. Her silver eyes were unreadable, but beneath the armor he felt an agonizing pull, a flash of memory, the smell of burning plastic, the sound of tearing metal, and the faint, panicked cry of a woman's voice. He shook his head, clearing the memory. No, he said, his voice quiet, determined. This suit has been through worse. I'm not leaving it. He didn't activate any shields or countermeasures. The Mark II didn't have any sophisticated defenses left, anyway. All he did was push his internal power output to maximum, bracing himself against the onslaught. This suit had faced the one thing that scared the Elysian Reach more than anything, the impossible. The purple-red temporal field slammed into the Mark II suit. It hit the chest plate, right on the spot covered in foam, and where Elliot had written, percussive maintenance zone. The crowd gasped. The sound of the energy field hitting the metal was not the softest edge they expected, but a loud, high-pitched hiss, like a banshee trapped in a blender. The foam evaporated instantly. The rust on the exterior, however, didn't turn to dust. Instead, the red oxide layer seemed to instantly cure, hardening into a ceramic-like shell. Where the field was most concentrated, on the rough, patched-up sections, the metal began to glow. It was an ugly orange-red glow like molten slag, but instead of disintegrating, the metal seemed to contract. The weld seams tightened. The joints groaned, then settled. Inside the helmet, the air turned hot. Elliot felt an intense pressure on his chest, like a fist compressing his lungs. But the suit held. After 5 agonizing seconds, a duration that had been lethal to the Scythian drone, the Kharvhul guard shut off the generator, his hand trembling. The crowd erupted in a confused murmur. The Mark II suit stood in the center of the polished marble floor. It was steaming. It was glowing. But it was whole. The cleaning foam was gone, but the crudely written graffiti, percussive maintenance zone, was still faintly visible on the chest. The rust had cured, making the suit even uglier, harder, and more structurally sound than before. Selene Varkis leaned forward, a flicker of something, not just curiosity but intense focus, in her eyes. Again, she commanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Maximum power. 10 seconds. Lord Xander, recovering his composure, stepped in front of the guards. Sovereign, this is barbaric. This is a human, not an inanimate object. He is the human offering, Selene stated, completely dismissive. And he did not eject. He stands. Proceed. The guard, visibly nervous, cranked the generator to its highest setting. Elliot knew this was it. 10 seconds of this energy would turn anything, even the reinforced hull of the Elysian Reach, into powder. He gripped the spanner so hard his knuckles turned white. He thought of the conduit he had just saved, the millions of people breathing because of a single stubborn bolt. He thought of the original engineers, the lost promise of this great station. The field slammed into him a second time. Screech. The interior of the Mark II turned blinding white. The metal around him screamed. The force of the field wasn't degrading the metal, it seemed to be aggressively tempering it. The old, flawed ferrotitanium was being refined and hardened by the temporal field, absorbing the energy and transforming its lattice structure. Then, from the shoulder joint of the Mark II, the exact spot where Elliot had fixed a hairline crack just last month, a loud, terrible crack was heard. The sound wasn't the suit breaking. It was the shoulder plate splitting. But instead of the suit falling apart, a brilliant, internal mechanism, something Elliot hadn't known was still operational, snapped into action. A specialized, automated repair foam shot out of the newly cracked joint, hitting the exterior and immediately hardening into a thick, resilient patch. This wasn't the broken external sprayer. This was the Mark II's emergency core stability system, a failsafe designed only for the most extreme, near-disaster scenarios. It was a piece of engineering that Elliot, in all his years of repairs, had never seen activate. This was the part of the suit that had survived the original test fire disaster 15 years ago, the moment that killed the original engineering team. This was the legendary, nearly mythical auto-repair foam unit, and it was working perfectly. The Entropy Field generator shut off abruptly. The 10 seconds had passed. The Mark II stood. It was no longer rusty or foam-covered. It was charred, scarred, and ugly, but it looked impossibly solid. Its patched sections had gained a dull, metallic sheen, and the new foam patch held fast. It had survived. It had not just endured the entropy field, it had used the degradation field as a forge. The entire delegation was silent. Lord Xander looked genuinely terrified, his arrogance shattered. Selene Varkis finally moved. She approached the steaming suit, circling it slowly, her powerful strides echoing in the silence. Her silver eyes were wide now, not with contempt, but with something akin to awe, and beneath that, a deep, unsettling sadness. She stopped directly in front of Elliot. She reached out a clawed hand, ignoring the heat radiating off the suit, and gently touched the hardened foam patch that had just emerged from the shoulder. "The Mark II," she murmured, her voice soft, dangerously quiet. "This suit, it should not exist. Not in this configuration. Not with this shielding." Elliot, exhausted and trembling, realized he had won the contest, but he had lost his anonymity. He had just presented the Kharvhul Queen with irrefutable proof of human technological genius. But that wasn't why her eyes were tearing up, why her voice was strained. The Queen looked from the scarred suit up to the faceplate, seeing her own reflection in the scuffed visor. "I recognize this suit, human," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I recognize the damage. I recognize the strength." Elliot's mind raced. How could she possibly know this retired model? It was ancient history. "Elliot," Billie Holiday hissed in his ear. "I have just cross-referenced the unique temporal signature absorbed by the Mark II against all historical station logs. The pattern matches only one event, the test fire of the experimental core drive 15 years ago. Your suit, Elliot, was in that blast." The Queen stepped back, raising her voice so the entire promenade could hear. "This is not just a suit," she declared, her voice regaining its low, powerful resonance. "This is a ghost. A forgotten weapon." She looked down at the Mark II's scarred boots. "The challenge is won. The human delegation earns the right to formal treaty negotiations." She then did something that shocked every dignitary, every media drone, and certainly Elliot Marlowe. She dropped her head slightly, giving a fractional bow, a movement of respect usually reserved only for her own military leaders. "But first," she commanded, looking directly into Elliot's visor, her voice now pleading, laced with an emotion that sounded terrifyingly like grief, "Engineer, remove the helmet. Let me see the face of the man who still wears the Mark II." Elliot took a deep, shaky breath, the spanner finally falling from his glove and clattering on the marble. His anonymity was over. His fear was nothing compared to the intense, almost desperate expectation in the Queen's eyes. He reached up, grasped the release latch on his helmet, and with a hiss of escaping air, he twisted the lock. He was about to reveal the face of the man who saved the station, and perhaps the face of the man who broke the Queen's heart. The entire Elysian Reach promenade felt like it had ceased to spin. The silence was absolute. Everyone, from the shocked Lord Xander to the relieved but utterly confused Ambassador Vance, was focused on Elliot Marlowe, standing in his charred, resilient suit, his hand on the helmet release. The air inside the helmet was hot, stale, and smelled of ozone and victory, but the sudden spotlight was more suffocating than any lack of oxygen. Elliot heard Billie Holiday's voice, now sounding less like an AI and more like a horrified friend, begging him in a panicked whisper. "Elliot, do not remove the helmet. You are still exposed to residual temporal radiation, and frankly, your facial hair is currently non-compliant with standard safety regulations." But the Queen's eyes held him fast. Selene Varkis wasn't looking at a maintenance worker anymore. She was looking at a relic, a survivor, a piece of impossible history. And the emotion in her silver eyes was a devastating mix of sorrow, accusation, and fierce recognition. Elliot took a final, ragged breath. He had spent 15 years in the shadows, fixing the flaws of a perfect station. He had embraced the rust and the grime. But now it was time for the truth. Yes. He twisted the locking mechanism. The servos groaned, and with a soft, final clunk, the heavy, scarred visor split from the neck ring. Elliot pushed the helmet off, revealing his face to the assembled galaxy. He was pale, slicked with sweat, and had a 5-day stubble. His brown eyes were tired, lined from years of squinting at schematic screens and tiny, broken components. He looked exactly like what he was, a tired, overworked, brilliant engineer. The sight of his face sent a ripple through the crowd, but among the Scythian Dominion, it was just curiosity. They saw a nobody. But Sovereign Selene Varkis didn't ripple. She froze. The air around her seemed to drop 10 degrees. The predatory grace that usually defined her vanished, replaced by a terrible, heartbreaking rigidity. Her silver eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, blurred. "It can't be," she breathed, her voice cracking for the first time. It was a sound of profound loss and shock. She took a step back, clutching her chest, where her dark armor curved like a breastplate. Her powerful demeanor, the Queen of the Kharvhul, dissolved completely. "Kayla, she whispered, using a name Elliot had never heard before, a name from a time and place far removed from the Elysian Reach. Elliot frowned, confused. My name is Elliot Marlowe, he corrected, pulling himself out of the Mark II's body harness, stepping out of the suit completely. He was just a man in a filthy jumpsuit now, small against the backdrop of the massive armored suit. Selene Varkis shook her head, her gaze shifting frantically from his face to the Mark II suit and back again. No. The damage on the Mark II, the shoulder fracture, the power conduit patch, that was Aaron Cole's signature. He was the only one who could weld that alloy after the initial blast. You are wearing his suit. Where is he? The room collectively gasped. The name Aaron Cole was legend, a ghost story whispered in the engineering faculties across human space. He was the chief engineer of the original Mark II project, the man who was officially declared lost during the test fire catastrophe 15 years prior, the very disaster that had nearly destroyed the Elysian Reach before its grand opening. Ambassador Vance looked from Elliot to the Queen, her face pale. Aaron Cole, he was presumed dead, Sovereign. His body was never recovered after the Phase 1 structural failure. Selene Varkis let out a low, mournful, almost animal sound. She pointed her trembling, clawed finger directly at Elliot. You look like him. You move like him. And you maintain his suit. But Aaron Cole had a unique scar, a burn mark near his left temple from a plasma flare incident 7 years before the test fire. Elliot felt a prickle of cold realization. Kayla? Aaron Cole? He reached up instinctively and touched his left temple. Yes, the faint, silver streak of scar tissue was still there, hidden by his hair, usually invisible. The Queen's eyes widened, confirming her suspicion. She looked directly into Elliot's soul, tears finally gathering in her fierce, silver eyes. No. It is you, she whispered, her powerful voice now tragically broken. Aaron. You changed your name. You disappeared. What? You were the ghost I looked for in every star system. You were the man who promised me he would never leave the station. Elliot Marlowe, the maintenance man, stood completely still, his world spinning. He looked at the woman before him, a regal, fierce alien queen, who was now openly weeping and calling him by a name he hadn't used in 15 years. My name is Elliot, he insisted, his voice cracking, trying to cling to the anonymity that had defined his life. I'm just a repairman. I found this suit in a decommissioned storage bay. I never heard the name Aaron Cole. Lord Xander, smelling weakness and desperation, stepped in again. Sovereign, this is clearly a human deception. A desperate attempt to salvage their position by introducing a fictional, legendary figure. The man is lying. Arrest him, he is a danger to your person. Before Xander could finish the sentence, the Queen turned on him with the speed and ferocity of a striking viper. Her voice dropped to a guttural snarl, alien and terrifying. Silence, Scythian. Selene roared. Her hands snapped out, and her ceremonial armor seemed to surge with energy. She didn't touch Xander, but the force of her rage made the air crackle. You dare question the honor of a legend you cannot comprehend? You dare speak of deception when you build toys that disintegrate under pressure. She whipped back to face Elliot. He saved my life, Xander. 15 years ago. He saved all our lives. He was the engineer on duty when the core drive went critical. He was the one who went into the radiation field to manually damp the singularity. The crowd, the media, and even Ambassador Vance were now in complete shock. The whispers about the test fire all ended the same way: an unexplained containment field, a sudden, blinding light, and the loss of the chief engineer. Selene Varkis then shared the final, crushing piece of history, her eyes locked on Elliot's face. When the core drive failed, she explained, her voice thick with emotion, telling a story only she and the man standing before her knew. The Kharvhul delegation was on board, inspecting the new station's power systems. We were trapped in the core control room, about to be crushed by the containment field failure. The doors were sealed, she continued, her voice heavy with memory. The pressure was crushing the observation deck. We were all ready to die. But then, the emergency foam. It wasn't standard. It was experimental. It wasn't meant to stop pressure, it was meant to absorb and redirect radiation signatures. Aaron Cole, wearing that same Mark II, came through the service access shaft just moments before the blast. He didn't come to save himself. He came to seal the shaft. She pointed to the Mark II suit, where the emergency foam patch had just deployed on the shoulder. He sealed the shaft from the inside, protecting the rest of the station, and used that same foam, that only his suit carried, to seal us in the core control room, giving us 3 critical minutes to evacuate through a secondary vent. He saved me, the future queen of the Kharvhul, and my entire royal retinue. Selene Varkis stepped forward, her regal bearing restored, but her sorrow was a raw, open wound. The Mark II was the only thing that could have survived that temporal/radiation search. The suit's survival today proves this man is the legendary Aaron Cole, she declared, looking around the room. She ignored the gasps and focused only on Elliot. But Aaron Cole was not just the engineer who saved my life. He was the man I was going to marry. The revelation landed like a physical blow. The fierce, untouchable queen of the wolf-like Kharvhul had been engaged to a human engineer, a man now resurrected as a foam-covered maintenance worker. Elliot swayed slightly. The 15 years of buried memories and repressed trauma were fighting their way to the surface. He finally dropped the facade, the pretense of Elliot Marlowe. He looked at the queen, at his former love, and saw the face of Kayla, the young Kharvhul scientist who had been stationed on the Elysian Reach when it was just a chaotic construction site. Kayla, he whispered, finally using the name he had tried to forget. The queen, Selene Varkis, let out a choked sob. Aaron, why did you vanish? We thought you were dead. Why did you change your name? Why did you hide as a janitor on the station you built? The question hung heavy in the silence, carrying the weight of 15 years of separation, grief, and misunderstanding. Elliot looked at her, then back at the charred, beautiful suit that had just saved his life again. He looked at the pristine, fragile station around them. He didn't have to say it, but the answer was clear in his eyes. He disappeared not because he wanted to run, but because the job wasn't finished. He was the ghost who stayed to keep the machine running. The air was still thick with the residue of the Entropy Field and the shocking weight of the Queen's words. The man I was going to marry. Elliot Marlowe, or rather Aaron Cole, stood exposed, his 15 years of careful anonymity ripped away by a rusty suit and a dangerous, impossible test. The silence of the promenade was now replaced by a furious buzz. Media drones were locked on, relaying the greatest romantic political scandal of the generation across the stars. Lord Xander, however, was not concerned with romance. He was concerned with power, and the sudden, humiliating collapse of his technological advantage. He saw the danger immediately. If Aaron Cole was alive, he didn't just represent a saved treaty. He represented the fundamental, terrifying flaw in Xander's entire plan. Xander stepped forward, his elegant robes rustling, his face a mask of calculated fury. Sovereign Selene, I sympathize with your emotional entanglement, but we must deal with reality. This, Aaron Cole, is a discredited engineer. He failed to prevent the test fire. And if he truly saved your life, why did he vanish? He confessed to changing his identity. This speaks not of heroism, but of a compromised agent or, perhaps, a deep-cover saboteur. Selene Varkis, who Elliot still saw as Kayla, stood taller, her natural regal dominance reasserted. He vanished because he is human, Xander. And humans are tragically flawed. But he is no saboteur. He is the only engineer who understands the deep structural secrets of this station. She then turned her gaze to Elliot, the fire returning to her silver eyes. Why, Aaron? Why did you hide? Why did you let the universe mourn you when you were here all along? Elliot looked around the magnificent promenade, at the polished floors, the shimmering holograms, and the smug, watchful faces of the Scythian Dominion. He looked at Ambassador Vance, who was frozen between diplomatic terror and stunned relief. I didn't run because of the failure, Elliot said, his voice quiet, carrying the weight of years of lonely work. I ran because of the success. And because of the numbers. He pointed to the spot high on the wall where he had been working. The test fire wasn't a failure, Kayla. It was a sabotage. The core drive didn't malfunction. It was pushed past its limits by an external override signal. I went down there to manually damp the singularity, but before I did, I rerouted the system logs through the Mark II's internal chronometer, the only system rated for that radiation level. He walked over to the Mark II, which now looked more like a monument than a suit. He slapped the rough, newly tempered chest plate. The official log says the core overloaded in 3 seconds, he continued, speaking to the room, but only for Selene. The Mark II's hidden log says the sabotage was pre-planned, and the override signal came from a temporary maintenance account that was opened and closed 30 minutes before the explosion. The moment I saw the real numbers, Elliot explained, I knew the enemy wasn't an accident. The enemy was already on the Elysian Reach. I faked my death because if the saboteurs knew the chief engineer survived and had the true logs, they would simply kill me, and then they would destroy the station later. Ambassador Vance, seeing her chance, quickly stepped forward. And the logs, Mr. Cole? Do you still have this proof? The logs are encoded using a proprietary encryption system, Elliot replied, his eyes narrowing as they flicked toward Lord Xander. Only the Mark II system can decode and project them. But they're not just logs. They contain the specific vibrational signatures I detected on every deck, showing precisely where the external override was initiated. Lord Xander scoffed, his voice tight. A convenient tale of a phantom enemy. A dead man's fabricated evidence. Your Mark II is a cobbled-together piece of scrap, not a secure data vault. It may be scrap, but it survived your entropy field, Xander, Elliot retorted, the engineer's sharp confidence finally returning. Tell me, Xander, why did you look so panicked when my suit activated the emergency foam? That foam is a specialized radiation absorber. It proved the Mark II was physically in the test fire blast zone, exactly where the logs were generated. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. And that foam is not available on the open market. Only the original engineering team and the security contractors had access to it. Scythian Dominion contractors were the primary suppliers of the original external maintenance systems, weren't they? The shift in the room was dramatic. The crowd no longer saw a disgraced maintenance man. They saw a witness, a survivor, and a keeper of damning evidence. Selene Varkis looked at the man she loved with renewed respect and heartbreak. Aaron, show us the logs. Prove this conspiracy. I can't, Elliot admitted, looking down at his glove where the spanner had been jammed. The decryption sequence requires access to the Elysian Reach main reactor core interface, which is currently locked down for the Unity Festival. The core interface is always locked down, Xander sneered, finding a foothold. The only man with access is the station director, and he is a secure Scythian client. Elliot shook his head. Not true. There is one loophole. The emergency manual override terminal for the core interface is located in the original reactor deck control room, Sector 7. It's a physical lock, designed for legacy maintenance access. It only accepts a retinal scan of an original Phase 1 engineer and the unique kinetic signature of the Mark II's core processor. Billie Holiday suddenly interjected, her voice now broadcast loudly into the promenade, signaling she had left the internal comms and was addressing the entire station. Correction, Mr. Cole. I have analyzed the security protocols. The emergency manual override requires 2 concurrent Phase 1 retinal scans. It was a failsafe installed after the initial design for redundancy. Elliot froze. 2 scans. He was one. Who was the other original Phase 1 engineer? He racked his brain. The entire team had been evacuated or killed. Wait. He looked at Selene Varkis. Michaela. She was a scientist, not an engineer, but she had been stationed on the Elysian Reach during Phase 1, working on the biological safety systems. She was the only other person in the room who had been physically present during the core drive development. Kayla, Elliot breathed. The Biological Safety Division? You had access to the Phase 1 retinal registration for core access redundancy, didn't you? A slow, painful memory dawned in Celine's eyes. Yes, she whispered, the realization hitting her. When we were together. You took my scan. You said, just in case the core needs a heart to talk to. She had dismissed it as a sentimental joke back then. Lord Xander, sensing the shift, shouted into the crowd. This is a plot. They are colluding. They intend to seize control of the station's core. Arrest them both. I invoked the Unity Accord emergency clause. Before Xander's guards could move, Selene Varkis gave a powerful, commanding growl. Her own Kharvhul guards, massive, loyal, and terrifying, snapped to attention, forming a protective perimeter around her and Elliot. The Unity Accord states that a reigning sovereign's safety is paramount, Selene declared, her voice ringing with final authority. My fiancé, Aaron Cole, has provided credible evidence of a 15-year-old threat to the Elysian Reach. We require access to the core interface for proof, or this entire station remains vulnerable to the original saboteurs. She looked at Elliot, her eyes holding both determination and a profound sorrow for the lost years. Aaron, you came back to life tonight. We need to go into the darkest part of this station, the place where you died, to finally prove the truth. Elliot simply nodded. He didn't need to be asked twice. The engineer who saved the station now had to expose the conspiracy that tried to kill it. He walked back to the Mark II, stepping back into the scarred, resilient armor. Billy, I need a direct route to the reactor deck control room, Sector 7, Elliot commanded, his voice gaining the clear, authoritative tone of a chief engineer. Route compiling, Mr. Cole, Billy replied instantly, her AI persona now completely overridden by the seriousness of the mission. Warning. Sector 7 is currently experiencing heavy Scythian security patrols, following a level 2 alert triggered by Lord Xander. Expect armed confrontation. Elliot sealed his helmet, the world turning back to the familiar, comforting view of his visor display. He looked at Selene, who stood ready, a fierce alien queen prepared to follow the man she thought was dead into the heart of danger. "Let's go, Kayla," Elliot said, the old name feeling right again. "We have a core to save and a wedding to postpone." Again. He and the queen, followed by her loyal Kharvhul retinue, stormed off the Grand Promenade, leaving behind the stunned diplomats and the furious, defeated figure of Lord Xander. The ghost had returned, and now he was going to expose the conspiracy that haunted his home. Elliot, now fully Aaron Cole again, moved through the dark service tunnels of the Elysian Reach with the practiced ease of someone who knew every bolt, every crossbeam, and every fault line in the station. His rusty Mark II suit, still radiating a faint heat from the temporal tempering, didn't just walk, it belonged. Following him was Sovereign Selene Varkis, her powerful Kharvhul guards moving with silent, lethal efficiency, their eyes scanning the tight corridors for ambushes. "We're nearing Sector 7 access," Aaron announced, his voice steady inside the helmet. "Billy, give me a status on the Scythian patrols." "High density, Mr. Cole," Billy Holiday replied. "Lord Xander has deployed every available security asset. They are converging on the reactor control room, likely intending to physically destroy the terminal before you can access it." "They won't get there in time," Selene declared, walking right beside him, her presence a fierce comfort. "My clan's knowledge of ambush tactics is superior to any security grid. We are taking the maintenance conduit, bypassing the main access." They moved through a low crawl space, forcing the large Kharvhul guards to flatten themselves against the bulkheads. Aaron didn't hesitate. He trusted Selene's tactical judgment implicitly, he always had. As they emerged onto the catwalk leading to the control room, the path was suddenly blocked by 5 heavily armed Scythian Dominion security guards, led by a furious Lord Xander. "Stop right there, fraudulent engineer." Xander spat, raising a particle rifle. "You will not destabilize the core. I warned you, the station director is under our protection. Hand over the Mark II's core processor." Aaron ignored Xander completely. He was already at the heavy steel door of the reactor control room. It was an antiquated, manual lock designed to be simple and unbreakable. The access panel was a thick piece of retro tech, just 2 circular scanning ports. "Kayla now," Aaron said simply. Selene stepped up without hesitation. She put her fierce silver eye up to the right scanner. Aaron put his eye up to the left. "Scanning retinal patterns," Billy announced. "Match, Aaron Cole, Phase 1 Chief Engineer." "Match, Kayla Varkis, Phase 1 Biological Integrity Analyst." "Clock. Yes." The lock disengaged. Lord Xander screamed, "Fire! Stop them." The Kharvhul guards reacted instantly, dropping into defensive positions, their plasma shields snapping into place, just as the Scythian forces opened fire. Blue energy bolts slammed into the shields, filling the narrow corridor with blinding light and the smell of superheated metal. Aaron and Selene slipped through the door and sealed it behind them, the heavy steel acting as a temporary barrier against the barrage of fire. The control room was small, stark, and utterly silent. In the center sat the original core interface terminal, a large, boxy console that hadn't been touched in 15 years. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light filtering through the external window, illuminating the massive, slowly humming reactor core beyond the safety glass. "This is it," Aaron said, detaching the Mark II's entire primary processor unit, a scarred, glowing metallic brick, from the suit's chest. He connected it to the terminal port. "Billy, initiate decryption of the embedded temporal logs." "Decryption initiated," Billy reported, her voice now emanating from the console speakers. Estimated time, 180 seconds. Outside the control room, the sound of combat was growing desperate. The Kharvhul shields were holding, but Xander was relentless. "We have 3 minutes, Selene said, pulling a specialized, short-barreled rifle from her armor. She took a position by the door, ready to fend off anyone who breached the lock. Aaron began furiously working the console, running diagnostics while the decryption ran. "I need to confirm the core is stable. If Xander can't stop the decryption, his second move will be to use the original sabotage backdoor to destabilize the core remotely and blow up the station, taking us and the evidence with him." As Aaron worked, he looked at Selene. At the woman he had loved, lost, and now found again, only for her to be holding the line with an energy rifle. "Kayla," he said, not taking his eyes off the flashing terminal screen. "When I faked my death, I didn't just vanish for the logs. I vanished because after the test fire, they told me the structural integrity was compromised and the whole station was a ticking time bomb. I was afraid that if I left, the core would fail again. I couldn't abandon the dream. Selene didn't look at him, her attention fixed on the door, but she spoke softly. And I couldn't stay on a planet where I thought the only man who understood me was atomized. I went back to my people, took the crown, and started searching the entire galaxy for a scrap of hope, for a technology that could withstand the impossible. And you found it, Aaron murmured, a small, sad smile touching his lips. In the shape of an ugly, foam-covered suit. No, Selene countered, her voice firm. I found it in the heart of the man inside the suit. The man who cared more about a leaky bearing than a galactic treaty. BZ's. The console flashed violently. Decryption complete. Billy announced. Temporal log extraction successful. Stand by for evidence projection. The main screen above the console, a massive holographic projection surface, flickered to life. It displayed two things side by side. The official Elysian Reach log from 15 years ago. Core drive overload due to system error. Failure code 7 alpha. The Mark II's embedded log. External override initiated from maintenance node 14 delta. Signal trace, Scythian contractor network. Timestamp, 30 minutes pre-overload. Aaron hit the project command. The massive screen in the control room immediately fed the decrypted logs to every screen on the Elysian Reach, including the entire promenade where Xander's forces had just breached the door and were fighting the Kharvhul guards. Lord Xander's voice, amplified by the station's comm system, suddenly roared, filled with panic. The logs are forged. It's a human fabrication. Desperate lies. The chaos peaked. Xander knew he was exposed. He grabbed a detonator from his belt. If I cannot have the treaty, the Elysian Reach will be dust. Activate core override. Aaron was already moving. He knew Xander's panic signal would target the core's cooling system. He slammed his fist down on the core interface, overriding Xander's command. Billy, execute Protocol Phoenix. Protocol Phoenix was an ancient, highly dangerous, but necessary core dump procedure that Aaron himself had secretly coded into the AI years ago, designed to save the station by temporarily forcing the reactor into a low-power, self-cooling standby mode. Protocol Phoenix initiated, Billy confirmed. Warning, system failure imminent. The lights in the control room flickered. The core beyond the glass dimmed dramatically, and a massive, deep WHRRR echoed through the entire station. Outside, the Scythian security forces stopped firing, disoriented by the sudden power drop. Lord Xander, however, was still screaming into his comms. He was defeated. Selene Varkis, seeing her opening, lowered her rifle. She looked at the panicked Xander through the reinforced door glass. The treaty is over, Scythian. Your shame is broadcast across the galaxy. Aaron pulled the Mark II processor from the terminal, securing the evidence. He looked at Selene. The danger was over, the station was safe, and the conspiracy was exposed. The aftermath and redemption. Weeks later, the dust had settled. Lord Xander was apprehended and his role in the conspiracy revealed. The Kharvhul Clans formally signed a permanent defensive and technology-sharing treaty with Earth. The Elysian Reach was safer than it had been in 15 years, thanks to Aaron. He was officially reinstated, not just as the chief engineer, but as the director of core integrity. His first official act was to re-examine every single minor anomaly he had catalogued as Elliot Marlowe. He stood in a vast, pristine new workshop, looking at the Mark II suit, which had been painstakingly restored. The entropy field had done its job. The metal was now dark gray, super-hardened, and the weld seams were impossibly reinforced. He hung it in the main display case in the new workshop. Selene, Kayla, walked in, now dressed not in heavy armor, but in the flowing, soft silks of her people, though her silver eyes were just as fierce. You are not wearing it anymore, she noted, looking at the formidable suit. No, Aaron said, smiling. It's there if we need it, locked and loaded. But I figured the station was running smoothly. The core is stable. Maybe I don't need the armor to keep the walls up anymore. Good, Kayla said. She slipped her arm through his. Because armor is heavy and you have other things to carry now. Like what? He asked, looking down at her, the man who had been a ghost finally feeling real again. Like the future, Kayla said simply. A vibration ran through the floor. A tiny, almost imperceptible shudder. Aaron froze, his head tilted, the engineer's instinct overriding everything else. Did you feel that? Feel what? Kayla sighed, a familiar, fond exasperation in her voice. Deck 4. Hydro pump number 6. The bearings are wearing out. It's vibrating at a frequency of 40 Hz. Kayla smiled, shaking her head. You are impossible. We are supposed to be on vacation. I'm just saying, Aaron said, already pulling a small silver hydro spanner, his old companion freshly polished, from his pocket. If that pump goes, the fountain in the park stops working and the kids love that fountain. He looked at her, his eyes full of love and a lifetime of commitment. Want to come hold the flashlight? Kayla looked at the man she loved. She looked at the spanner in his hand. She looked at the deep, satisfied peace in his eyes. Always, the Wolf Queen said. If the station breaks again, Aaron, she said, taking his hand and leading him toward the lift. At least this time we will fix it together. They walked away from the window, leaving the breathtaking view of the stars behind them, heading down into the working guts of the machine, ready to keep the beautiful, flawed dream of the Elysian Reach spinning. And that is the incredible story of Aaron Cole, the engineer who became a ghost to save the galaxy, and who found his future in the past right where he left it with the magnificent sovereign Selene Varkis. What an epic journey of redemption, love, and a very stubborn piece of rusty metal. If you enjoyed this deep dive into an interstellar conspiracy and a star-crossed romance, please smash that like button. Your support is what keeps these amazing stories coming. Subscribe and join our community so you never miss another video. Tell me in the comments below, what was your favorite moment from this story? Was it the Mark II surviving the Entropy Field, or the dramatic reveal of Aaron's true identity? I read all your audience suggestions and they genuinely help shape what we cover next. Check out the channel's playlist for more emotional, engaging stories of forgotten heroes and incredible moments. Until next time, stay safe, keep your life support conduits secure, and may your days be filled with impossible survival and second chances. Good wishes to all of you.